Welcome to the podcast where we talk about state and national parks here on Park It. This is episode 3, and we're going to talk about the Great Smoky Mountain National Park and why it's important. I'm Avery Nettles, and here today we have B. Goodman, and we will talk about the history of the park as well as the wildlife within the park. If you love nature, park it right here and enjoy the view. So, B, you said that you've been to the Smoky Mountains before?
Yes, so I've been so many times I can't count. My mom loves bears, so we used to try to go literally all the time when I was little, especially because my mom wanted us to get out and see everything. She wanted to see the bears. We would go on vacation there because it's kind of close to Clinton. It's like an hour or something away. So it was kind of easy for us to go and spend the day there, come back. We'd fly kites and have picnics and stuff. So I've been there several times.
That's really cool. So, I've been there, I think, 2 or 3 times, maybe. It is a really cool park, and, the wildlife in there is so neat and, diverse. You don't see that wildlife, anywhere else, really.
Yeah, and they've added a lot of animals over the past couple of decades. I know that they started reintroducing elk more in the Tennessee side. They were more just on the North Carolina side, but they've kind of been moving them into Tennessee. At one point, they had some wolves come in.
Oh, wow.
But it was a bad thing, so they ended up not keeping the wolves in the Smokies because it, messed with the deer population and things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, every time I go, I've never not had a time where we haven't seen something different.
When I've gone, we just saw, bear and some deer and things like that. But nothing, any more than that. But we didn't stay very long. We stayed, 2 or 3 days there.
Yeah, so the goal is always to see a bear because, my mom loves them. But it's also, the biggest, exciting thing that you can do when you're there, I guess, wildlife-wise. Definitely bears are always big to see. You always see a bunch of turkeys, especially now. Lots of turkey. Deer, there's always tons of deer. As a joke, I like to keep a count of squirrels. We keep, a count for, deer and bears. We'll be okay, we've seen 3 bears today. We've seen, 10 deer. And I've counted 30 squirrels. I guess it was just something I started when I was little, so now I've just kind of kept it up. And now I've kind of added a salamander count because once we go hiking and we get closer to the waterfalls, you start to see more and more salamanders, especially if you start turning over rocks. So I've started to keep a count for the salamanders.
What's your favorite animal that you've seen within the park?
So it's definitely not my favorite animal overall, but my favorite experience with this animal was I saw a coyote and we were actually parked just drinking some water and stuff in the car. And this coyote is coming pretty close to the car, and I had my windows down, and I was I wonder if they do some of the things that dogs do, because they're closely related. So I grabbed a bag of Cheetos and I shook it and started to open it, and this coyote looked at me like our dog does at home, and I just started cracking up. I was I can't believe, because coyotes don't like noises. When you try to scare them off, generally you want to be loud and make a bunch of weird noises to scare them away. So we were kind of doing that and talking kind of loudly because we wanted it to go away because we wanted to get out of the car. And this coyote didn't care. But as soon as I opened the bag of Cheetos, it was you have my attention. So I was oh my gosh, our dog does the exact same thing. So it was pretty funny.
Interesting to see that. Especially and with wild animals, you're oh my gosh, you're not expecting them to do that. And they're it's because I think they've been around people so much that they're so used to people that they are just kind of picking up on okay, this person is doing this or that, and they're not as freaked out and scared as they normally would be. But they also still are wild animals, so you have to be cautious around them as well. Because I know when we went, we saw a bunch of bears in some trees and some on the ground and stuff, and people were trying to get really, really close to them and pet them, and the park rangers were no, you can't do that because they're still wild animals. Yes, they are kind of in a way domesticated, but they're not at the same time because they are within a park. And remember, they're wild animals, so you shouldn't get close to them either.
They normally don't feed them unless there's something going on. There was a really bad winter a couple of years ago. It started really early, so bears just weren't able to get enough food for the winter and everything. I know then they were kind of putting some food out, but they were still putting it out in locations away from the normal public view. But they normally try not to feed them because they do want to keep them as wild as they can be because it's still like a reserve. It's still a
Yeah.
wild animal place. Like it's for them.
Because like they don't feed them like every day or anything like that, but it's just like like you were saying, because they are having food shortages and things like that, and it was hard for them to find food, and they wanted to keep the population there and not have them move elsewhere.
Normally do that to try and keep them out of Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge
Yeah.
and Sevierville, because they already are getting into Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, especially. So they're trying to draw them away from the cabins and things, because people have their trash and they
Yeah.
leave their cars unlocked and everything. So bears will get into that.
I also heard that the Smoky Mountains is like one of the most visited parks on the East Coast.
Yeah, I think it is like the number one most visited park for the East Coast, especially. Every time I've gone as a kid, especially, it's always packed. Like going in the summer, it's always enormously packed. Like every trail you try to go on to hike, every like cabin or the little gift shop and stuff that they have, it's always absolutely packed. And especially like the little houses and stuff that they have, there's a little water mill. It's not just people from Tennessee. Like we usually will see different license plates and everything, and we always have a lot of international travelers too. Like you'll be walking on the trail and you'll hear somebody speaking Spanish, and then you'll hear somebody speaking Arabic. Like it's very diverse, and it's big for everybody, which is kind of odd to me, just because it's the same thing that's in my backyard too. So it's weird to me, because it's like I see the same thing like every day, but they're not gonna see that in China or elsewhere.
Because like when I went and visited the parks and stuff like that, being from Atlanta, it's very different wildlife and very different like scenery than what I'm used to. So to me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool to see like nature and stuff like this, and mountains
Yeah.
and waterfalls like that. But to a lot of people in Tennessee, they're like, okay, I see this kind of stuff all often, or it's not like that unusual to see like these types of animals or things like that. But to other people, it's like, whoa, I don't get to see this every day. This is kind of really cool and stuff. So I think that's why a lot of people come to the park, like travel and go to different locations and stuff to see things that they don't normally see. So I can understand like why to you it's like, okay, I see this daily. Like, why are you so amazed by it? But to other people, it's like, whoa, this is so cool. Because like when we went, we saw like the bears and stuff, we were like, oh my gosh, they're like black bears and all these different types of bears. Like, that's so cool. But to people who see them daily, they're like, okay, and?
I think it's a little bit different with bears, because the bears do typically stay hidden away from people. They try to keep themselves away from people. So for me, there's not bears in my backyard, but like we have peacocks, we have coyotes, we have bobcats. All of that has been in my yard before. It has literally been Thanksgiving Day, and we've had turkeys walk through the yard. Poor timing on their part. But bears are always like a little special thing, because it's like a very specific thing for the Smoky Mountains and Tennessee especially. I mean, like Smoky Bear with firefighting and everything, like that was named from the Smoky Mountains. So it's a really big part of East Tennessee history.
Yeah, because I mean, that is kind of cool. I didn't really think much about that or know that. I mean, I think I did know that, but like I've never really thought about where the name Smoky Bear came from. With that, it comes from there, and like how it's like protect your wildlife and protect the fires and stuff like that for fire prevention, which is also a very important thing. Because I think recently, within like the last 10 to 15 years, I think there was like a bunch of wildfires up in the Smoky Mountains, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so there was a really big fire a couple of years ago in Gatlinburg, and I was actually in school when it happened, and my last class of the day had gotten to go outside during the day, so we were out there, and there was seriously so much smoke coming from Gatlinburg that I could see it over an hour away at my high school outside. And it was so bad that they made us go inside, because you could smell it, and it was so bad. But I actually got to volunteer within the next couple of days to go up there and help hand out food and toys and stuff, because it was around Christmas time too. So I got to volunteer and do some of that. I saw a lot of Gatlinburg damaged, and it broke my heart to see it like that, because I go there so much, and I've spent most of my summers there as a kid. We still go there every year. We get a cabin, and it's not just like a vacation place for everybody. It's a home. Like people actually do live there and have lives there. So to see that destroyed just really like broke my heart.
That is devastating to see places like that, especially things that have like significant meaning or value to you, like destroyed like that, and from like nature and from like natural causes like wildfires and things like that. But that is neat though, that you got the opportunity to go and help with the community there.
Yeah, even though it's like an hour or so away, it still feels like a piece of home to me. And I know that there's other people who have the same feeling about like Nashville that are from here or closer to Nashville. They feel like Nashville is part of their home. The Great Smoky Mountains are part of my home. So it really hit me to go out and see everything and register how bad it was. There was literally so many people donating things to try and help out that they were having to give like the volunteers some of the donations because the building we were in didn't have power because it was connected to the power grid that had been damaged from the fire. So they were like, we have to give away some of the refrigerated donations just to volunteers because it can't sit here all night.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was pretty big to see East Tennessee volunteer in the way that they did because, of course, Tennessee is the volunteer state. But there's been very few times in my life where I've actually gotten to see that play into truth. So that day I definitely got to see people really, like, extend their hand to help out people that they don't even know.
Yeah, that is cool. Did you get to go to the Smoky Mountains, like, after the fires and all that?
There was a good part of it that was closed, but it was not nearly as much as people, like, think. I'm not going to try to put a number on it, but it was mainly, like, the city of Gatlinburg and that area. But there was still a huge part of the park that was easy to get into and accessible for anybody, especially if you were on the North Carolina side, because it is a multi-state park, so you could have gone several other places. It was just specifically like the Gatlinburg area that was.
So, like, you were saying how you've been to the park like almost every summer. Like, did you notice like anything from the wildfires, like before and after, like the differences between in the park, like major or minor?
So we get a cabin every summer. Not necessarily the same cabin. We usually try different places to try different things, but generally it's all in the same area of Gatlinburg. It's like the renters part of Gatlinburg.
The renters part of Gatlinburg?
The renters part of Gatlinburg where they keep all the cabins and everything. So that was a really big portion of what was lost in the fire. So that wasn't a big deal for us coming as tourists, other than the fact that we couldn't stay in like a particular set of cabins. But even as we were driving through, and even now, last summer, when we were driving through and up some of the roads, like one side of the street would still be rebuilding and putting up new foundations and stuff from the fire that had been lost. But on the other side of the street, this cabin has been standing there for 30 years. So it was kind of odd to see literally just split in the road how different things were just from that fire.
Do you remember what year the fire happened? Because I know it was not too long ago, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
So I think it was my junior or senior year. So that would have been 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And that was one that was started by like two teenage boys.
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because, well, it's not funny, but both of the boys were actually from my hometown. They didn't go to my school, but they went to like the competing high school in my county. So people, they knew who they were, but they never wanted to come out and say their names because they are minor. So they never actually did say that who they were. But one of them kind of had a plan to do something, and the other one was actually like mentally disabled. So I don't really think that he was as much at fault as the other guy was. I think he was just his friend and he was there, and that's what I had heard a lot about it. And my mom actually works with somebody who was very close to the family that one of the boys was in. So she had kind of talked about it a little bit, and she'd said that it mainly just seemed like that boy was getting into trouble just because of who his friend was. It wasn't necessarily like they planned to go up there and do anything. They just went up in the mountains because they were bored, and then they started playing with matches. And perfect example of why you shouldn't play with matches.
Yeah, because I know that fire spread to like parts of northern Georgia and stuff, because I was hearing about that when I was in high school too, which is interesting to know that it was started by two teenage boys, because I didn't know that. But like, it's also kind of neat though to see like the revitalized park and stuff, and how like it grew, and still even like you get to see like the regrowth from like things like that, and it's really cool. And I hope to get to be able to go back sometime soon and visit the park, because I really did enjoy my time when I was there.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend if the next time you go to go into Gatlinburg and go to the Anakista like sky lift. So it's a lift that takes you up to this part of the mountain, and they have this trail dedicated to the fire and regrowth and everything. So you can walk through kind of like a timeline and see how everything went and how things have changed. And it's a really beautiful area, and you get to overlook a lot, and you get to see the area that was burned, but it come back in nature.
Yeah, I was like kind of younger in like high school, so I didn't really get to like appreciate the park as much as I would now. And so that's like one of the reasons why I want to go back, because I don't really remember it very well, because I was kind of like at a young age, or I was like just starting to get into things like that. And so I think it would be cool to go back and see that and get to like see the exhibit like you're talking about and see all that stuff. But it was really nice to get to sit here and talk to you today, B. Again, this was episode 3 here on Park It, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And talking about the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, I was really happy to get to relive some memories. So thank you so much for letting me come on and talk with you about the Smoky Mountains.
And we hope to see you here again next time on Park It.